Right, Congress, could you start to settle down, please? Just to share something with you, delegates, we had the Unions into Schools debating competition this lunchtime, and when one of the schools found out about the nature of our next session, they managed to get a dispensation from their teachers to actually come along to sit in on this session. So we will be hosting a group from the Grove Academy as part of our next session because they're just so interested in it. Okay, delegates, welcome back from the lunch break. Congress, please note that the election for members of the General Council for 2024-25 was uncontested. Also, please note that the election for the 2024-25 Standing Orders Committee was uncontested. A list of members of the General Council and the Standing Orders Committee for the next year is included in your final agenda document on pages 45 and 46. Congress will now begin our special session on the crisis in Gaza. The next session will be chaired by Kat Boyd of PCS and the STUC General Council. As we prepare to welcome our international guest speakers, we will now view a short video message on behalf of the firefighters of Dundee's twin city of Nablus.
My name is Masa Hlehel. I'm volunteer in Nablus Fire Dept, and I wanted to send you all solidarity. The STUC has always been a friend of the Palestinian people, and it is crucial that you continue to make representation on our behalf, to campaigning and lobby for the immediate ceasefire that is killing our people. Humanitarian aid must be allowed through. Palestinians are starving and dying as the world watches on. We are aware of the thousands of people demonstrating across Scotland in support. So please do not underestimate the power you all have. Keep marching, keep lobbying, keep campaigning, sending love and solidarity from Palestine, free Palestine.
Thanks. Congress, my name is Kat Boyd. I sit on the STC General Council from the Public and Commercial Services Union. And I'm really grateful to Mike for enabling me to chair this session at our Congress. And because this is a historic moment for our movement, I'm really proud to be able to introduce the next part of the agenda, which is on the crisis in Gaza. And as we begin, I just want to open the session by emphasising that this is a workers' issue. When war, when genocide happens abroad, who pays the price at home? Whether it's soaring inflation, redirection of public money into more military spending, be it global instability, who pays the price here? It's the working class. Now, my union, PCS, we represent civil servants, and we represent civil servants in the Department of Trade, and they oversee arms exports to Israel. And those workers want to cease work immediately, as it looks likely Israel is in breach of international law. And that message is clear, and I think it is resounding from parts of our movement, that if the government won't stop it, then we will. And as I said, I share this in my opening remarks only to emphasise the relevance and the importance of this session, that the crisis in Gaza is a workers' issue, and that our movement has power, be it on the shop floor or influencing the shambolic scenes of politics, and that we stand with the people of Palestine, that we are not just witnesses to their grief and loss of over 33,000 loved ones, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. And when we speak at Congress and we say brothers and sisters, that is who we are talking about. Nearly half of those killed by Israel are children, no different from our own children. We are not just witnesses to that grief and pain. We call for a ceasefire, but we also have agency. We are actors, and we can take action to show real solidarity with the Palestinian people. In this session, In this session, we will have two speakers today. The reason for my pause there is that we are trying to get the Palestinian ambassador on the link. There's just a little technical difficulties, but it should be okay. And then, time allowing, I've got some questions to put to them. So our first speaker is... So our first speaker will be known to many of you. He's been speaking truth to power for many years in support of his people, and most recently has been a regular fixture on our screens since last October. Hussam Zomlot has been head of the Palestinian mission in the UK since 2018 and should be properly described as the Palestinian ambassador. We're incredibly grateful that he has been able to join us today.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, all. My friends, and I see many friends around here. And it is such a pleasure and a privilege to address you today at this session on Palestine. I'm really sorry I could not be there in person, but such are the time. Allow me, please, to thank Rose Foyer and Dave Moxham and all of the team of the Scottish Trade Union Congress for this gracious invitation. There is a long and storied history of Scottish trade union solidarity with Palestine. The first British city to win and to twin with a Palestinian city was Dundee with Nablus back in 1980 on the back of trade union pressure in the city. We remember many great names who have taken part in that historic event. So I truly feel among Friends, as you know, the situation in Palestine is critical. Allow me to give you a brief summary on the catastrophe that is befalling the Palestinian people in the West Bank and in Gaza. Gaza has been, as you all have been following, subjected to an unprecedented and genocidal onslaught for the last 6 months that has killed and wounded over 100,000 people, destroyed 70% of Gaza's housing stock, and decimated the health and education sectors completely. Israel has imposed a famine on 2.3 million Palestinians. In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, settler violence is rampant. Hundreds have been killed, thousands have been detained and are being held without charge or trial. Whole villages have been depopulated and homes have been demolished, forcibly displacing more than 4,000 people in the West Bank alone. And that was only in 2023. The situation has become so bad that this week, only this week, the Lemkin Institute for Genocide Prevention issued an active genocide alert saying Israel is committing genocide not just in Gaza, but across Palestine. And despite the mountain of evidence of Israeli war crimes, the UK continues to resist calls to take stronger actions against what it says it's ally. That is Israel. It's ally. This raises so many questions, my friends, that are simply not being asked of the British government. What kind of ally makes you complicit in the worst of international crimes? What kind of ally drags you into wider regional confrontations? What kind of ally is continuing to consolidate and deepen an illegal 57-year-old occupation, contradicting even the UK's own policies and laws? Why is the UK afraid of insisting on and imposing, if necessary, the very international laws of which it is so proud of being a main architect? How did the British political establishment across the political spectrum become so engulfed with Israel that it cannot see Israel for what it is? So connected. A colonizer of another people's land engaged in the apartheid and genocide against the people under its occupation. I mean, how difficult it is to see reality for what it is. So, my friends, Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people did not start suddenly on October 7th. It was enabled over decades and decades of impunity, decades of evading accountability, and a history of blind support from its Western sponsors, backers, that never took seriously into account the rights of Palestine's native population. Britain promised European Jewry a homeland in Palestine with the 1917 Balfour Declaration. Nonetheless, the Balfour Declaration described the more than 90% of Palestine population merely as the non-Jewish community, denying us, even then, 107 years ago, our own identity, who we are. They defined us by who we are not. Indeed, there was never a Jewish majority in Palestine until the ethnic cleansing of 1947, 1948, the Nakba events, when 2/3 of the Palestinian people were forcibly displaced by the Zionist militias then. They were never allowed, we were never allowed back to our homes, our properties, our farms. Instead, their homes and lands, our homes and lands, were confiscated by the nascent state of Israel, a massive act of appropriation, which was given legal cover under Israel's 1950 so-called absentee property law. This injustice lies at the heart of the Palestinian struggle. Even for those who stayed in what became Israel, they saw their properties confiscated under the so-called present absentee law. Absentee category. So can you imagine there is a law that is described as present absentee? You are there, but you are not there. Present but absent. The verbal gymnastics so prevalent today in attempts to excuse and defend Israel's behavior started here in this country. The rest of historical Palestine, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, as you all know, came under Israel's occupation in 1967. For 57 years, my friends, we have lived under Israel's military rule. In this time, we have seen the birth of Israel's illegal colonial settlement project and its constant expansion. The buildings of settlements in the occupied territory is a war crime. It is illegal under international law, and it is the most obvious, direct, and physical obstacle to any two-state outcome espoused by the UK government and the US and the rest of the world. Nevertheless, Israel was never, ever punished for this quite explicit and illegal land grab. In the 80s, Western powers convinced the Palestinian leadership at the time, Yasser Arafat and his colleagues, that if they turned their focus away from a one-state formula, the PLO until then had insisted that the resolution would come with a single secular democratic state for all of the people in the historic land of Palestine. And instead, Western governments argued we should pursue a two-state formula. Palestinians could finally, they said, fulfill our right to self-determination. That idea was formalized by the PLO's Declaration of Independence in 1988, and this was followed by the 1993 Oslo agreements, which foresaw a Palestinian state on 1967 borders and with East Jerusalem as its capital to live alongside Israel in peace and security. So my friends, that was 30 years ago. But rather than usher in the necessary dismantlement of the settlement project, Israel used the 30 years, the Oslo period, merely to presage massive settlement expansion. Thus, from a settler population of around 200,000 at the beginning of Oslo to now almost 1 million illegal Israeli settlers living in the occupied territories. Indeed, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's current prime minister, who rose to power in the Oslo years, is on record as saying that his proudest political achievement was to prevent the emergence of a Palestinian state. He has also said that there will never be a Palestinian state as long as he is in charge. Yet, despite clearly and unequivocally contradicting global consensus around a two-state outcome, including the stated policies of its staunchest allies, strongest allies, closest allies, the US and the UK included, Israel has never been held to account or taken to task. Instead, Israel's occupation has only grown more brutal. In Gaza, for instance, this constituted squeezing the economic life out of the territory with a 17-year-old land, sea, and air blockade that stopped the free movement of goods and people to and from Gaza. In the West Bank, we are under constant attacks by armed and unhinged settlers under the protection of the Israeli military. And I'm so proud to see Shaher Said, the president of our trade unions, here with us, because he comes from Nablus, where many of the villages surrounding him have been attacked only in the last few days, like Limghayr and many other villages. And I'm sure my good friend, Brother Shaher, will let you know and share with you the horrific situation in the occupied West Bank as we speak. This is all overseen by twin legal system in the occupied territory. It's a twin legal system that grant Israeli illegal settlers in the occupied territory more rights, different rights, than the Palestinians living on their own land. This, as human rights organizations in Palestine, in Israel, and around the world, including the UK's Amnesty International, have all acknowledged, documented, that this is a full-fledged apartheid system. Yet, even the charge of apartheid has failed to stir Israel's Western backers into any action. And now Israel's Western sponsors are supporting what the International Court of Justice has deemed a plausible genocide against the Palestinian people. So, my friends, it is a bleak picture. It is indeed a bleak picture. As you will hear from other panelists, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is unprecedented in scale and devastation. This is an entirely man-made disaster. I should have said this is an entirely Israel-made disaster. So scholars even suggest that it will take us 10 to 20 years to recover from this genocide if it stops today. And even if it does stop today, experts say we will likely lose 10,000 lives in Gaza as a result of the malnutrition and disease. The wholesale destruction of Gaza's health and education sectors requires urgent attention, or we will face a lost generation. Yet, here again, the Western government has played a precious role, a very dubious role to stop all this. The agency best placed to deliver this much needed aid and to re-establish both health and education services in Gaza is UNRWA, the UN Refugee and Work Agency. But based on entirely unsubstantiated Israeli allegations, the British government has decided to suspend funding for this vital humanitarian relief agency. Is there any hope, my friends? And is there any hope? There is always hope. There is absolutely always hope. But it requires that Israel's Western allies overturn more than a century of denying Palestinian their rights, human and national rights. And it must start with accountability. With accountability. Israel's exceptionalism must end. Israel must be treated equally to everyone else under international law. War crimes must be punished. Settlements must be rolled back, and Israel's intransigence must be met by a determined effort to compel adherence to international law with sanctions and arms embargo. Israel has proven that it has no respect for international law. Its Western backers have shown they are willing to support almost any and all actions Israel chooses to take, up to and including genocide. The change will come from you, my friends. And here I'll conclude. The change can only come from you, as it started more than 40 years ago. It is already coming from you. The unions, the ordinary citizens, the human rights groups, the political activists, students, and young people everywhere. Millions upon millions have taken to the streets across the globe demanding change. And I'm so proud of particularly the British people, and you've seen the streets of London, of Manchester, of Glasgow, of Edinburgh, of Cardiff, everywhere. They have done so consistently and repeatedly and determinedly. They have done so because they see clearly that Israel is not only a threat to the Palestinian people. Israel is a threat to the entire edifice of the global rules-based order, to the structure, to the very idea of our rules-based order. They see clearly that the kind of world they want to leave to their children is one in which equality before the law is respected and lawbreakers are punished. You give us hope, and I've been following particularly the Scottish trade union sides. And this is an apartheid South Africa moment for us. And for Israel, when the scales fall from people's eyes everywhere, like the anti-apartheid movement. This is now a global movement for Palestine that has united the masses to speak with one voice to become an unstoppable movement, unstoppable force. And you, trade unions in Scotland, in the UK, and around the world, are at the forefront of this movement. You represent the voice of conscience and humanity for Palestinian liberations and return, for the equal implementation of international law, for the sake of peace and justice. Even in these darkest moments in Palestinian history, there is hope, my friends. There is hope that reason will overcome irrational bias. There is hope that humanity will once again unite to condemn genocide, the vilest of crimes, and vow, we all should vow, once again, that we will never repeat such horror. And this time we must mean it. All of us must mean it. For everyone, not just for the Palestinians, for everyone. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for that incredible contribution to our Congress. Our second speaker, as mentioned, will be Shahir Saeed, the longtime president of the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions, our sister organisation in Palestine. As part of the genocidal bombing in Gaza and the destruction of all types of infrastructure, the headquarters of the PGFTU were recently bombed by the IDF. Before I turn to Shahir, can I also introduce to you Walid Thabit? He will be translating for Shahir. He is a firefighter, a member of the FBU from Perth, and we are incredibly grateful to him for coming along today.
مساء الخير الأخ شهير. تفضل بإلقاء الكلمة وخلي لي الفرصة بعدك نترجم. تفضل.
مساء الخير لك والإخوة والأخوات أعضاء المؤتمر، ولأخي وصديقي سفير دولة فلسطين في المملكة المتحدة حسام زلمط على كلمته الرائعة والتي تعبر عن ضمير الشعب الفلسطيني.
Good afternoon all. Thank you for inviting me. A big thank you to my brother, the Palestinian ambassador, for his message to you. Thank you, Mr. President, and to the Congress for inviting me.
مع انتصاف هذا اليوم تكون الحرب حرب الإبادة على غزة وشلال الدم قد دخل يومه 193 يوم 193 يوم، وماكينة القتل والدمار الإسرائيلية تحصد المزيد من أرواح الضحايا الأبرياء بلا توقف أو استراحة.
Starting from today, it's been 193 days since this genocide applied on the Palestinian people, killing lives every single day non-stop.
فقتلت لغاية الآن 40,000 شهيد من قطاع غزة، بينهم 14,550 طفل و9,600 امرأة.
The casualty accounts from starting today up to 40,000 casualty, including 14,550 children and 9,600 women.
و1100 على الأقل من كبار السن.
Including also 1,100 of elderly people.
من الطواقم الطبية قتلت 485 مسعف وعامل في الإغاثة الطبية.
Including also 485 of medical staff, nurses, doctors.
و465 عامل يعملون في الدفاع المدني في الفاير ستيشن.
Also 465 staff of the fire service or civil protection over there.
اللي تم قتلهم من المنظمات الدولية زي الأونروا 152 موظف متحدة تم قتلهم.
152 staff of international organization including UNRWA.
من الصحفيين والإعلاميين 140 صحفي وصحفية وإعلامي اللي تم قتلهم.
140 journalists and a member of the media.
الكوادر التعليمية أكثر من 300 كادر معلم ودكتور وبروفيسور تم قتلهم بدون ذكر أسماء، تم قتلهم وإبادتهم من قبل الجيش الإسرائيلي.
300 of educational staff, including teachers, that doesn't include the one unknown of which being killed by the IDF and nothing being reported.
حسب عدد المجازر اللي ارتكبوها خلال 193 يوم، المجازر اللي ارتكبت خلال 193 يوم 2941 مجزرة موثقة في الأمم المتحدة، يعني الأمم المتحدة موثقة هذه المجازر.
In the 193 days, 2,941 genocide being committed until now. And this is witnessed by the UN and documented.
لا أحد يعلم عدد المفقودين، ما حد بيعرف قديش عدد المفقودين، 10,000 ما حد بيعرفه. يوميا بتم اكتشاف مقابر جماعية قتلهم الجيش وطمروهم ودفنوهم تحت التراب يوميا، وخاصة في محيط مستشفى الشفاء في غزة.
Until now, up to 10,000 people, or could be more, still missing. No one knows about their whereabouts. And this is around the Ashifa hospital there in Gaza.
هذه المجازر لا ما بدي افوت في الاحصائيات قديش عدد البيوت اللي تم تدميرها. اكثر من 85 الف بيت وسكن تم تدميره نهائيا بشكل نهائي في قطاع غزة.
This is without mentioning also the destruction of infrastructure over there. Over 85,000 houses been demolished.
جامعات، كليات، مقرات نقابية،
union offices,
كنائس، جوامع،
mosques, churches,
مدارس. كل المدارس تقريبا دمرت. كل المدارس غزة تم تدميرها.
all schools in Gaza been destroyed, nothing left.
اليوم عدا ما يقوم به هذا الاحتلال من حرمان من حليب الأطفال، من الماء للشرب. بديش أقول لك حليب الأطفال، الطعام، الغذاء اللي بمنع يفوته لقطاع غزة وللعمال والعائلات في قطاع غزة.
Also the besieged and withheld food, baby milk, water from children there and leaving them to starve.
عمليات تجرى للأطفال بدون بنج، بدون تخدير. عمليات تجرى للنساء بدون تخدير.
Operation doctors been treating kids and women without anesthetic. So
لا يوجد هناك أي معدات طبية لأن الاحتلال يمنع من دخول المعدات الطبية.
Yeah, Israel withheld all the medical equipment in the hospitals. So all the operation being conducted without anesthetic.
للأسف الكبير جدا كل ما ذكرته هو يتم على أعين العالم أجمع وبالذات الدول العظمى وعلى رأسها كمان بريطانيا ما يقوم به من جرائم.
All this been happening in front of the world and especially here in the UK and nothing being done. All the stats I mentioned to you.
رسالتنا لكم بأننا باقيين على أرضنا. لن نترك أرضنا لا في غزة ولا في الضفة الغربية ولا في القدس.
My message to you will we stay and will stay resilient in Gaza and in Jerusalem.
هذه الأرض لنا وهنا وطننا ولا يوجد وطن آخر. الاحتلال يحاول خلق أوطان بديلة في الرصيف المائي. الذين بنوا هذا الرصيف بدم الشهداء وجثث الشهداء يسموه رصيف مائي بين قبرص وغزة. وهذا عار على البشرية أن يتم بناء هذا الممر المائي بدون على دم الشهداء ودم وجثث الأطفال وجثث النساء.
This is our land and we're not going anywhere. This is our land. Israel trying to find alternative space for us. Even this port is being built between Gaza and Cyprus. This is like we're not going anywhere. This is not our land.
إسرائيل تمارس الإبادة الجماعية وكل جرائمها ترصد ليس فقط من فلسطين بل كل العالم يرصد جرائم هذا الاحتلال.
Israel is committing genocides every day. The whole world is watching this.
ما قام به هذا الاحتلال من جرائم من بطش وقتل وإبادة للحيوان. حتى الحيوانات تم قتلها من قبل هذا الاحتلال وحرمان الشعب الفلسطيني وخاصة في غزة من الماء والوقود وحرمانهم من الغذاء. أين العالم؟ أين العالم يسكت عن شعب لا يوجد لديه غذاء منذ أكثر من 193 يوم؟
Where is the world in this 193 days? Israel's committing genocidal actions, killing animals, depriving food, water, electricity from UN, and the whole world sitting and watching this. Where's the world in this 193 days?
للأسف هذه الجرائم تتم بشكل ممنهج وبشكل مدروس من قبل حكومة الحرب الإسرائيلية وعلى رأسها نتنياهو وجيشه.
These genocidal actions being planned and conducted systematically by the Israeli government and with the Netanyahu government actually.
هذا الجيش وحكومة الحرب الذي يجب أن وصفهم ليس فقط بأنهم هم زعماء الإبادة الجماعية في غزة بل إنهم أيضا هم مجرمين ويجب محاسبتهم أمام العالم أجمع. وآن الأوان على الحركة النقابية في العالمية أن يقوموا بمحاسبة هؤلاء القتلة الأطفال وقتلة النساء.
These criminals, they have to be brought to justice in front of the world. It's about time for the World Trade Movement to challenge these crimes and bring them back to make them accountable for their actions.
صحيح إنه الاحتلال قام بتدمير الBGFTU في مكتب الBGFTU في غزة، وقام بتدمير حضانة للأطفال تابعة للBGFTU، ومخبز للخبز للBGFTU تم تدميره، بالإضافة إلى عشرات المراكز الثقافية وما يقوم بتدميره من مؤسسات. حتى المجلس التشريعي البرلمان الفلسطيني في غزة أبى دمره.
Israel conducted more action. They just destroyed all the offices of the Palestinian Federation of Trade Unions, even bakeries, nurseries, even the building of the Palestinian parliament over in Gaza has been destroyed. Nothing been left.
رغم ما يقوم به هذا الاحتلال من جرائم، نقول له إن سعيك الذميم لإبادة شعبنا الفلسطيني وحذفه عن الوجود لن ينجح طالما بقي فينا رمق من الحياة.
Despite all this, we tell Israel, you won't defeat us. We will stay here forever and we will fight and we will be resistant.
لأن الإنسان الفلسطيني على ضعفه هو الوطن.
Sorry, carry on.
لأن الإنسان على ضعفه هو الوطن، وليس ما يحيط به من حجارة وعمارة، وهو المنهل العذب لسردية الصمود والرفض ومعاندة الفناء، وهو الذي سيعيد حتما بناء كل شيء دمر هذا الاحتلال.
We are resilient and we are resistant and we will keep fighting and we'll stay here and we will rebuild our country again.
وحكومة إسرائيل ستحتفظ فقط بعد نجاتها من هذه المذبحة عار الفاشية والفشل في إبادة شعبنا الفلسطيني.
And Israel will be left with the shame being a fascist country trying to destroy and killing our Palestinian people.
وهي وحدها التي ستغادر هذا العالم وهي مدانة في الإبادة الجماعية لشعبنا الفلسطيني.
Israel will be left with this tag of being a genocidal country.
أنني أطلب من مؤتمركم الموقر.
We demand from the Congress
أن يطلق نداء إنسانيا.
We call to call humanitarian aid.
ليس فقط للحكومة البريطانية بل لكل العالم لوقف هذه الجرائم، لوقف الهجوم الإسرائيلي على قطاع غزة وعلى على شعبنا وأهلنا.
Not just for the British government, but for the whole world to stop immediate ceasefire and stop this violence in Palestine.
وسحب الجيش الإسرائيلي من قطاع غزة فوراً.
and withdrawal of the Israeli military from the Gaza Strip.
كل دقيقة يوجد هناك مجازر في قطاع غزة. كل دقيقة في عملية قتل في قطاع غزة.
Every minute there's a genocide in Gaza. Every minute there's a war crimes happening.
يحاولون خلق حرب مع إيران من أجل إبعاد الأنظار عن ما يقوم به هذا الاحتلال الإسرائيلي من جرائم.
That they're trying to start a new war with Iran to try to divert the world's attention from the genocide they committed in Palestine.
ومن أجل منع المساعدات من أن تدخل لشعبنا وأهلنا في قطاع غزة، وخاصة الغذاء والمواد الطبية.
And to prevent the humanitarian aid coming into Gaza, and especially the water and medication and medical aid.
وأكيد تعلمون عن المجزرة التي سوف يرتكبونها ويغطون عليها، هي مجزرة رفح.
And surely you know what's been covering the massacre that's going to happen in Rafah.
بعد ما تم تدمير كل شيء في غزة الآن سيذهبون إلى رفح من أجل قتل الناس وترهيبهم، وأيضا إبعادهم عن قطاع غزة، وعمل كل ما يلزم من أجل أن يقوموا بمنطقة منزوعة نهائيا من السكان في رفح ومنعهم من الدخول إلى رفح. هناك أكثر من 1,400,000 فلسطيني.
After what they did at the north of Gaza, they're moving on now to Rafah, and just to finish off the job, there will be more killing and trying to displace what's left, up to 1.4 million people outside Rafah to a neutral area they're trying to create.
لكن هم يعتقدون ذلك، لكن أنا بحب أحكي عن أيضا عن وضعنا المأساوي رغم المأساة، إلا أن نساءنا في قطاع غزة يقومون بولادة الأطفال. فهناك على سبيل ما يقوم بهذا الاحتلال من جرائم وقتل الأطفال خلال فترة 193 يوم، رزقت العائلات الفلسطينية بأكثر من 10,000 طفل. هذا الاحتلال والعالم يجب أن يسمع، مهما عمل هذا الاحتلال لن يستطيع أن يبيد الشعب الفلسطيني.
Despite all this, what's all been happening, women in Gaza being given birth, and there's been 10,000 newborn kids. The whole world should know this. The whole world should listen to this. We will stay here, basically.
مطلوب أن يكون هناك تضامن حقيقي مع فلسطين. هذا التضامن هو إنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي عن أرضنا ووطننا، لأن طالما هذا الاحتلال موجود في الضفة الغربية وقطاع غزة والقدس، راح تستمر الجرائم الاحتلال، راح يستمر القتل الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. المهمة الأساسية المطلوبة من كل الحركة النقابية في العالم هو إنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي والاعتراف بدولة فلسطين وعاصمتها القدس على الأرض الفلسطينية التي احتلت في 4 حزيران عام 67. هذه رسالتنا لكل الحركة النقابية في العالم. فليسقط الاحتلال، فليسقط الاحتلال، فليسقط الاحتلال.
This is the main message to us. This violence and genocide must stop. It's about time to the whole world to stand up to Israel and withdraw back of the Palestinian territory since 1967 and end the apartheid regime. It's about time to end all this. Free Palestine, down to the genocide, to colonization.
الاحتلال هو
Shukran, Habibi. And thank you to Walid for the wonderful translation. We have... In this session, we have time for one question. Sadly, the Ambassador Sam has had to leave us, but I'm sure delegates understand that situation. But we do have time for one question for Shahir. And I think that important question is, if you were sitting in front of the Prime Minister today, what would your message to them be?
الأخ شهير سؤال من الكونغرس هون في المؤتمر يسألونك لو كنت تجلس أمام رئيس وزرائنا أو زعيم أحزابنا السياسية الرئيسية الأخرى ما هي رسالتكم لهم؟
رسالتنا هو أكبر عار على الحكومة البريطانية وعلى رئيس الوزراء أن يحمي هذه الحكومة الإسرائيلية حكومة الحرب في قتلها للأطفال والنساء وتدمير وإبادة شعبنا في قطاع غزة. لا يوجد هناك قطاع غزة دمرت بالكامل. يعني هذا عار على البشرية أن تسمح لهذا الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بقتلنا وتدمير غزة بالكامل من أجل تهجير الناس والسكان من قطاع غزة. آن الأوان أن يتم وقف هذا التهجير.
My message to the Prime Minister is shameful, really shameful for the UK to stand up to this government in killing Palestinian people and displacing them from their town. There's nothing left in Gaza, and about time to stand up to cease all these actions, basically.
Thank you.
وبقول له لا للاحتلال الإسرائيلي، لا للاحتلال الإسرائيلي على الأرض لفلسطين. لا يمكن أن يكون هناك عدالة اجتماعية، لا يمكن أن يكون هناك عمل لائق طالما هذا الاحتلال موجود على أرضنا وطننا. المشكلة الرئيسية والإرهاب الحقيقي الحقيقي هو الاحتلال الإسرائيلي.
Yeah. The real terror is from the Israeli government happen. It's about time to end this injustice and end occupation. End occupation. This is the main message.
Thank you both. We've come to the end of our session today, and we've heard the testimony from our speakers about the gravity of the situation. And I know that we have all watched on television or seen on our phones or in newspapers what is happening, and we cannot turn away. We've witnessed these things, and many of us have protested. And the question is, as a trade union movement, what will we do now? I think from today's debate that's about to happen, I hope that we can channel the spirit of resistance of the Palestinian people and that message of hope from the ambassador and the General Council statement, which should be with delegates. If this is to pass at Congress, I hope that you will be able to take this out back into your workplaces, to share the testimony that you have heard, to make sure that the actions that are on this are doable. We do have power and we do have agency, and we can make change by standing in solidarity with our Palestinian brothers and sisters. Thank you very much.
Prime Minister, we are calling on you to stop the mass killing and destruction of Gaza
and the ethnic cleansing and suffering inflicted on our families.
We are the Gaza Families Reunited campaign.
For the last 6 months, the situation in Gaza has been catastrophic.
Our families have the right to live in our homeland in freedom and dignity.
But we are extremely concerned for their safety.
As we continue appealing for an immediate ceasefire without success, we urgently call on you to create a Gaza family scheme.
2 years ago, you swiftly introduced the Ukraine Family Scheme to protect Ukrainian families.
We are simply asking for the same protection for our families.
We are 350 Palestinian families living, working, and studying in the UK.
For months, we have been trying to reunite with our loved ones. Our homes were bombed. We have lost so many precious lives, and we don't want to lose any more.
The Gaza family scheme is an urgent matter of life and death.
The UK must rise up to its historical, present, and moral responsibility toward the Palestinian people and afford this protection to our families.
In the last 6 months, Israeli bombardment, incursions, and the siege of Gaza have killed over 33,000 Palestinians
and injured over 75,000.
They are our mothers, fathers,
brothers, sisters,
children, grandchildren,
our grandparents, aunts, uncles,
in-laws, cousins, nieces, and nephews.
The visa options available to them are extremely limited and do not work.
The UK government successfully did it before, and you can make it happen again.
You have the ability and the moral obligation
to save our families and reunite us until return is safe.
It is critical that you respond to our plight and evacuate and reunite us with our families now.
We need a Gaza family scheme in the UK.
Thank you, Congress. I'd just like to thank Kat for her chairing of that session, to our speakers and to our translator. Thank you. We'll now continue with the international debate with motions from Section 9 of the agenda. I invite Rose Foyer on behalf of the General Council to speak to the statement that was issued this morning.
Thank you, President. Congress, Rose Foyer, moving the General Council's statement on Palestine. Congress, as we've heard during the special session, we are gathering at a time when the most profoundly tragic events are unfolding on the ground in Gaza. We are all witnessing genocide being perpetrated by the government of Israel against the people of Palestine. Nobody can condone the actions of Hamas on October the 7th. They were inexcusable, unjustifiable, and horrific. But what we've seen since then is the same unjustifiable slaughter inflicted on the people of Palestine, except on an industrial scale. Indiscriminate killing of civilians, women, children, the elderly, aid workers and journalists. More than 35,000 dead, a death toll averaging 250 each day, a number significantly higher than any other major conflict of the 21st century. Congress, it's easy to feel helpless as these atrocities unfold. It's easy to think that we can't make a difference, that we can't influence the global politics that are at play here. But in these darkest of times, we owe it to the people of Palestine to stand with them. Now, more than ever, it matters for this Congress to highlight our movement's long-standing solidarity with the people of Palestine. Now more than ever, we need to raise our voices. We need to harness our power to demand action from our government, to demand action from every single MP in Westminster. This is no time for party politics. This is about our humanity. It's time for unity, and it's time for courage, and it's time for every single politician in Westminster to get their act together, call for an immediate ceasefire and the halting of all further weapons sales to Israel. And let me be very clear, Congress, all politicians who fail to take this action have the blood of innocent lives on their hands. Their failure brings shame on all of us. Their failure empowers Israel to deliberately target women and children, the most hideous form of oppression and torture for any nation. And all because our world leaders have failed to use their powers to stop this genocide. Our UK government, joining others, now calling for urgent humanitarian aid, a ceasefire and a halt to arms sales would be a start. But we know it will likely still not be enough, with an Israeli government hell-bent on ignoring the concerns of the international community. That's why it's so important that we turn up the heat with a well-planned BDS strategy, led by workers, with targeted boycott, sanctions and divestment designed to have the maximum impact and garner international support. And we must demand from our governments that as long as they flout international law, we will not normalise Israeli government brutality by allowing it to function as a normal state. Congress, can you imagine our leaders allowing Russia to profit from produce originating from an occupied Ukraine? No. Our movement has consistently argued for sanctions against Russia over its illegal war and occupation of that country. So we insist, no, we demand that the same standards be applied to Israel. And we will keep on demanding action until the bloodshed ends, until the rebuilding is completed, until the illegal settlements are dismantled, and until we see delivery of the right of Palestinians and the right of the people of Israel to live in peaceful, recognised, secure and independent states. In closing, it's of no surprise to me, Congress, that our debates on this issue have quite rightly been passionate and heated. But whatever debate there has been on the details, let me assure all of our delegates here today that the STUC will continue to take the strongest possible position to support the people of Palestine in their time of gravest need. And the very strongest position that we can take is the one that unites our movement. So thank you, Congress. I urge you all to support and get behind the General Council's statement today, and I look forward to hearing your points from the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ros. We'll now move into the debate. The way we're taking this is now the movers of the 10 motions on Palestine have all been agreed and accepted that they will remit their individual motions in support of the General Council statement. But we will, as way of debate, we will call up the individual movers of the motions as they appear on the order sheet. We will then ask for each of them to be formally seconded, and then after the 10 speakers on the motions, we will get a wider debate where folk will be able to contribute. So I'd ask the movers as they come up just to confirm that they've agreed to remit and speak to the debate. So initially, to kick it off, I call the movers of motion 106 on Palestine, Public Commercial Services Union.
President's Conference, Martin Kavanagh on behalf of PCS to support the General Council's statement referencing our motion 106 and confirming that we are agreed to remit to pass this statement to maximise the unity in this hall today and send a clear message to Israel, to the UK government and to every politician out there that this cannot and will not be allowed to continue. Conference, PCS were one of the first unions in the UK to nationally issue a statement after the 7th of October. And we rightly condemned the atrocities by Hamas on Israeli citizens. But that statement also was absolutely unequivocal in condemning the immediate response of the Israeli state. And the reason that we now continue with that condemnation is because anybody who thought or was bought into the idea that this is about self-defence, anyone who bought into the idea that this is a rightful response to the atrocities of 7th of October has either been deliberately not watching the events unfold in Palestine or, quite frankly, has no place in the human race. Congress, we are very clear that this did not start on the 7th of October. PCS have a long-standing history of supporting the cause for Palestinian freedom, and I am immensely proud of our union, has for many years led the calls for demanding justice for the people of Palestine, in Gaza and the West Bank. We've been absolutely clear that for as long as injustice is inflicted upon the people of Palestine, that until there is a free and independent nation of Palestine, we will continue marching, we will continue lobbying, and we will continue protesting. And we do this because if we stand for nothing else as a movement, we stand for internationalism. It is a core principle of the trade union movement. Standing up for the oppressed people everywhere runs through everything we do. That's why the message from Congress today should be unequivocal. We are not going anywhere until there is an immediate and permanent ceasefire and the killing stops. The scale of Palestinian suffering is hard to comprehend. Certainly standing here today, I can't even begin to do justice to what we've seen unfold before our eyes. But more children we know are being killed in Gaza over the last 4 months than all wars worldwide over the last 4 years. We know that there's been a 300% increase in Gaza of miscarriages under the Israeli bombing. We know that health agencies have reported that babies and children are so dehydrated and malnourished they can't even cry. Conference, in our humanity, we cannot possibly turn away from that. Shame on those who've allowed this to happen. Shame on those who sit in any parliament who give cover to Israel to commit atrocities, war crimes and genocide. And shame on all of those who sell weapons to Israel and profiteer from the brutality of the Palestinian people. Congress, and the message from our members in PCS to those who sell arms, members in government departments who are there to authorise the sale of those arms. If you are found to breach international law, we as a union will take you to court. We will take legal action against you, and we will suspend our members working in that area. We will not allow our members to be used as pawns in a conflict where the ICJ has ruled there is a plausible case of genocide. These calls for an immediate halt to the flow of arms and ceasefire have gained greater significance in recent days. Comrades, I would say this in closing. For the sake of the Palestinians, for the sake of the Middle East, and indeed for the sake of whole humanity, we need an immediate and permanent ceasefire and an end to the killing. So yes, please support this statement today. Please, everyone get behind it. But we also need to send a clear message and a deafening message. The comrades, brothers and sisters, the message to politicians and lobbyists everywhere is this. We in our movement will not be threatened or intimidated into silence. We will not be silenced by accusations of anti-Semitism. Calling out the slaughter of Palestinian people is not anti-Semitic. It is the only rightful humanitarian response to what we witness. And we must also say this with absolute certainty, comrades, that if demanding an end to this slaughter, if demanding, asking for a people to be allowed the dignity, safety and the respect that they need and security, if calling for the principles of socialism to be embraced as we demand the most basic of human rights for the Palestinians, if that defines us as extremists, we should wear that with a badge of honour. Because I'll tell you what, if that makes me an extremist, I'm an extremist. Solidarity, free Palestine.
Thank you, Delegate. Can somebody please formally second motion 106? That's formally seconded. Thank you. Now move on to motion 107, Gaza immediate ceasefire, release of hostages and de-escalation from the Fire Brigades Union.
Congress, President Gus Sproul, FBU, moving motion 107 and agreeing to remit. Congress, I'm humbled to be on the same platform as our colleagues and comrades from Palestine, and I'm privileged to be here to carry on the long history of solidarity with the FBU and the Palestinian people. It goes back past the days of the late Ken Cameron, carried on by brother Jim Malone and Denise Christie, through bringing practical solidarity through delivering of fire engines, equipment and training to those doing our job in Nablus that we saw in the video earlier. It's humbling further to be here on behalf of the FBU moving a motion on Palestine in the company of two of the people who began my education on this subject more than 20 years ago, Linda Somerville, Dave Moxham, and it's testament to the consistency of the position of the trade union movement and the integrity of those that lead it that I'm here doing this. When writing our motion, we discussed just how bad things could become by the time we actually got to the point of moving the motion here at Congress, and it's unimaginable just how bad the situation has been allowed to become. The horrors described by our comrades earlier elicit no action from Western governments. The targeted killing of the world's central kitchen aid workers sparked momentary outrage from Western leaders, but it wasn't even the worst atrocity committed by the IDF that week. The massacre at the Al-Shifa hospital days earlier barely made the news, despite the reports from survivors of hundreds of people being executed in their hospital beds. The doctors and medical workers were being rounded up, abducted, tortured, with their bodies buried in mass graves. The Israeli war machine now seems hell-bent on a wider regional war, and the Western hypocrisy and backing of that fanatical regime continues. I know how powerless we all feel, how angry and heartbroken we all are watching the genocide and ethnic cleansing being live-streamed from Gaza and the occupied West Bank by people desperate for governments to take action and bring about an immediate ceasefire and an end to the relentless slaughter of men, women and children. The General Council statement sets out what we will do as a movement, and the FBU will seek to build support and send practical solidarity wherever possible. Congress, we will remit our motion and ask you to support the General Council statement. But in closing, I want to take the opportunity to send our solidarity to the firefighters and other emergency service workers delivering humanitarian services in the most appalling conditions imaginable. Congress, I move.
Thank you, comrade. Can we have a formal seconder for motion 107? Thank you. We now move on to motion 108, Lasting Peace in Palestine, to be moved by the Association of Locomotive Engineers and Firemen.
Conference, my name's Chris Conley, representing ASLEF, first-time delegate and first-time speaker. Thank you. Congress, the STUC has a long history of calling for peaceful two-state solution in Palestine and Israel, and I am proud to continue this tradition. We know that the ongoing conflict in Gaza is not a new occurrence. The illegal military occupation of Palestine has led to numerous human rights abuses over many decades, with over 33,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Congress, these numbers are growing every single day we do not act. Neither the killing of Israeli civilians nor the collective punishment of the people of Gaza will do anything to either end the occupation or bring peace. Something must be done, and something must be done now. Congress, Palestinian trade unions have sent our calls for support, and it is our job to answer. The current situation cannot be allowed to continue. Bombings of Gaza must stop. Going forward, a just and permanent peace consistent with international law must include the right to collective self-determination of the Palestinian people, as well as the resolution on the right to return. The government in Westminster and the Scottish Government must do everything they can to ensure this happens, and that's what we are calling for today. We must continue the call for a ceasefire in Gaza, a peaceful solution to the conflict across the whole of Palestine, including the West Bank and the return of the Israeli hostages. This motion reaffirms the STUC's solidarity to Palestine and the commitment to peace and a two-state solution. It calls on all of us to do what we can do to stop this senseless violence. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Congress, please support peace. Please support this composite.
Thank you, Delegate. Can I have somebody to formally second motion 108? It's formally seconded. Now call on the movers of motion 109, Genocide in Gaza, Dundee Trade Union Council.
Thanks, Chair. Jim Malone, Dundee TUC, moving motion 109, Genocide in Gaza. Comrades, could I initially ask you to remember Abdul Rahman, Fadel and Mohammed Jabi, who were murdered yesterday in Agrabah, Nablus, by fascist illegal settlers, the latest citizens of our twin city to die since October. Comrades, the genocide in Gaza continues. The 76 years of occupation continues. 76 years of mass detention, torture, daily humiliation continues. Home demolitions, forced displacement, ethnic cleansing continues. Targeted assassinations, murders and indiscriminate slaughter continues. The overwhelming blame lies with the numerous Zionist regimes who have occupied the land from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea, who have invaded, attacked Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, and occupied mandatory Palestine from 1948 to the present day. The State of Israel is an aggressive apartheid entity, blatantly ignoring 91 UN Security Council resolutions. Congress, we applaud South African government's referral to the International Court of Justice that Israel is guilty of genocide. We also support the Nicaraguan government for referring Germany to the ICJ for its arming of the Israeli occupation forces. The honourable actions of the South African Nicaraguan government stand in stark contrast to the criminal actions of the UK government. The Tory government have enabled, armed and given political cover to the Tory government. They have armed Netanyahu. The party of Balfour are Zionistic to their rotten core, failing to offer support for a ceasefire at the UN, totally subservient to their US masters. The UK government is an international embarrassment. Comrades, the UK government's opposition frontbench are similarly charged. Keir Starmer's utterances in support of the Zionist nuclear-armed superpower, his stated approval of the genocidal actions of Israel render his tenureship of the political wing of our movement untenable. Starmer should resign. His views are more akin to Likud than Labour. Shame on him. Congress, today we mourn our fellow workers, trade unionists, murdered and maimed in Palestine, journalists, aid workers, UN staff, teachers, lecturers, nurses, doctors, paramedics, local authority workers, artists, musicians, poets and firefighters. We commit to remember the great-granddads and grandmums, the grandparents, the mums and dads, the aunties, uncles, the big and wee brothers and sisters, the toddlers and babies of Palestine. Congress, we are all part of the largest social movement in recent history. Stand with Palestine. Continue to march to demonstrate and to use your voice in the upcoming general election to support anti-genocide candidates. Congress, Dundee TUC remits in support of the General Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Congress, can I see a seconder from the floor? Thank you. Moving on, can I call motion 110, Escalating Crisis in the Middle East, from the STUC Annual Black Workers Conference, to move their motion? Thank you.
Congress, Black Worker, Lael Roxanne Hill, on behalf of the STUC Black Workers Conference, we remit to the General Council statement. President, Congress, comrades, there have been warnings over the last months that Israel's attacks on the Gaza Strip, on the West Bank, on Lebanon and in Syria and Iraq risk regional war. In the last few days, that war has come closer. The Iranian drone and missile attack on Israel was a response to a series of attacks, including the bombing of the Iranian consulate in Damascus on the 1st of April, which killed several people. Under international law, this represented an attack on Iranian territory. That deliberately provocative attack was not condemned by the US, the UK, or the UN Security Council. This fatally weakens attempts towards a diplomatic solution. British forces have been actively involved in countering the Iranian drone missile attacks, whilst governments here fail to meaningfully address the cost of living crisis, attack civil liberties and the frameworks protecting them. When introducing the Economic Activity of Public Bodies Overseas Bill, also known as the Anti-Boycott Bill, last summer, Michael Gove said it would ensure that local government acts as it should in accordance with the interests of its citizens. But when it comes to the substance of the bill, it does the exact opposite. It will prevent us from using the few instruments that we have to call attention to global injustice and refuse to support oppressive practices. The government argued it's necessary to go further in order to meet the Conservative Manifesto commitment to ban public bodies from imposing their own boycotts, disinvestment or sanctions campaign. Anti-Semitism, which we should rightly oppose, was cited as a concern, and the government sought to link this with the BDS movement and any actions against Israel and the territories it illegally occupies. Both the Scottish and Welsh governments have recommended their respective parliaments withhold legislative consent, raising concerns on the compatibility of the bill with freedom of speech and ability to make ethical investments. However, much of the bill falls within the reserved responsibility of the UK for foreign policy. We are fighting new laws which restrict rights to protest and risk censoring freedom of speech. We're trying to manage the consequences of years of austerity and pressure across all public resources. We are fighting a relentless system, and those trying to survive this are experiencing increasing isolation, poverty, and mental health crisis. This is even more impacted by war, violence, and the effect of a warming planet. We need to recognise that these strict systems and structures act to reinforce the exploitative social, political and economic systems that prioritise profit over people's lives and normalise and strengthen colonialism and economic extraction. If we seek to create a world where we're all free to thrive, then we must contend with the uncomfortable reality that our lives are built on systemic forms of exploitation. Only on Friday, Keir Starmer committed to increasing defence spending. In doing so, the Labour Party is matching the intentions of the Conservative government. Governments have long claimed that spending on defence and weapons manufacturing supports job creation and economic development. However, as a report by the STUC and Scottish CND shows, more jobs would be created if the same amounts of money were invested in other areas of public spending. Putting billions of pounds into the pockets of our own companies and their investors will not reinvigorate the economy in any meaningful way. If we call ourselves trade unionists, if we call ourselves internationalists, and if we see what it means to be in struggle, we need to understand that this is also class struggle, and class struggle is a worldwide struggle. Conference, please support the General Council statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Colleagues, can I see a seconder for the floor? Thank you. Can I keep us going? Moving on to motion 111, Palestine Solidarity, moved by Edinburgh Trade Union Council. Can I see the mover? Thank you.
Cormac Ray, Edinburgh Trades Council. I've got a really dry throat. I was going to fill up my bottle with some water, but then I realised it was Eden Springs. And Eden Springs is UK is entirely owned, controlled and managed by Mayanot Eden, which steals water from the Seleucia spring in the occupied Syrian Golan, where it is bottled in the illegal Israeli settlement of Katzrin. So the water that we're using here at this event is Eden Springs, and we're talking about BDS, we're talking about making a difference. I think we should start with that. I think if we come back next year, we should demand that we're not drinking the water from Eden Springs. And I'd just like to briefly take the opportunity to discuss the May 1st Day of Action for Palestine and action that we've taken in my branch, Edinburgh Lothian Borders DWP. On the February 7th, we linked up with Scottish Government PCS members to stand in solidarity outside the Scottish Government building during our lunch hour, which read, PCS stands with Gaza. We heard some excellent speeches and stood in solidarity with the Palestinian trade unions and the Palestinian people. Most of us then returned to work, but some of us went to the Scottish Parliament and met others there. And it's obviously, everyone's going to the protests on the Saturdays, but it's also really good to build this on a day of action on May the 1st to really build the movement. And we've got members who've never really been involved with PCS come forward and get involved. Activists are sort of popping up. It's a really good organising opportunity. So I think we should be calling for the STUC. It'd be great if we could call for this day of action and really help build the momentum in workplaces from a grassroots level, because it does make a difference to Muslim members and how they feel about it. So it's good to support that. Thanks.
Thank you, Delegate. Can I see a seconder from the floor? Thank you. Colleagues, can I move now to motion 112, Palestine, and it's submitted by Glasgow Trade Union Council. Can I see the mover, Jen?
Sisters and brothers, Jennifer McCary on behalf of Glasgow Trade Union Council. I'm content to, on behalf of the Trades Council, to agree to remission. We are unified in all the proposers of motion in our support for the General Council statement to show an unprecedented sense of solidarity and purpose in what we set out to do together as a movement across the Scottish Trade Union movement. Our motion came from a meeting that we held earlier this year of delegates of Glasgow Trades Council, and we were joined in a Zoom call by Maj Ishala, who was the International Officer of the General Federation of Trade Unions from Palestine. It was perhaps the most humbling experience of my life in the trade union movement, that dark, cold night where our hearts were broken and our heads were down, as he explained the great difficulty in which the trade union movement were facing. But he remained absolutely stoic in his advice to us, and he asked us that we must do whatever we can to put pressure on the politicians, that we should never give up, and that's what our movement does while the political class lose their moral compass. Because, as Humza Yousaf said today, principles, commitment, steadfastness, moral clarity, leadership, while others equivocate, we have a landscape in this struggle where we have educated ourselves and we understand what the occupation of Palestine is and what it means long before this genocide. And who pays the price for war? Those who are displaced, those who are without pay, without homes, without treatment, left without shelter, with no food, who face targeting by bombs and guns as they attend to the daily necessities of life, who deal with death and destruction as they face genocide in our lifetime on our screens. So what should we do? What action can we take? In our movement, we have legacies, we have history. The workers at Rolls-Royce at East Kilbride halted the fighter jet engines that were destined for Chile when they were required to process repairs or prepare them for export, the parts of the machinery of war whose fighter engines they knew, because of our movement, would be used for illegal acts to attack the citizens of another country. They did the right thing. They had the political education from our movement that they gained in their trade union, and they acted as a union, and unity brought them strength. And that meant that those workers had the confidence to act, to question, to take a stand. 50 years ago, that happened in March 1974. Bob Fullerton ran around the factory 50 years ago and shouted to his colleagues, "There's Chilean engines in here. The whole place is awash with them." And he said, "I would like to think that not just trade unionists, but all fair-minded people would have thought what we did was right. It's a difficult proposition to refuse an instruction." And immediately after he refused to work on the engines, he wondered if security would be escorting him out the door. It is right that those actions should be workers-led from the shop floor upwards, and we would commend affiliates like PCS and Unite and others who are currently examining how they can support workers who have approached their trade union and asked for a mechanism where they can do this safely with protection. And those affiliates have offered to share the lessons learned and the strategy at a special conference that the General Council statement calls for, to expand the experience. Visibility will give workers the confidence to act. And we must remember those like us, teachers, health workers, administrators, and make a connection with them, inspired by the solidarity and action of the health workers and the FBU have done. But finally, in this point, the politicians and the political candidates who will seek our votes, we are watching you, and your silence, and your lack of condemnation, and your failure to witness, to call for sanctions and immediate ceasefire for an end to arms export. Yes, we are watching you. You have a moral obligation. Our movement has legacies. We have strength, as Kat said, we have agency, and as Bob Fulton said, let's do the right thing.
Thanks, Jennifer. Can we formally second? Thank you. Colleagues, can I move to motion 113, Palestine, submitted by East Ayrshire Trade Union Council? Can I see the mover? Thank you.
President, Congress, Arthur West from East Ayrshire Trade Union Council, and we are prepared to accept remission of our motion and support the General Council's statement. I think other colleagues have mentioned how heartbreaking the situation is for the Palestinian people at the present time, and that's what part of what our motion tried to do. So I don't think I maybe need to say any more to add to the contribution of those colleagues, because the situation is truly heartbreaking on a humanitarian level. But what our motion tried to do, because I'm sure that most of us that do Palestine solidarity work are often faced by that question in trade union meetings, and if you're doing any public work, where people feel a sense of hopelessness about the situation, and they ask what they can do. And I suppose anything that we can do in Scotland is essentially maybe inadequate, but nevertheless, we have got to try and continue with Palestinian solidarity work. And Dr. Graham Watt of the splendid charity Medical Aid for Palestinians, which is one of the charities we should support, said that what we need to continue to do is make Palestine solidarity work, whether that be fundraising or political or trade union campaigning, continue to make that normal part of the Scottish political and social scene. And I think that's something we can do in terms of the activities that we support. So what our motion tried to do, it tried to make some suggestions to affiliates about things that are organisations that they might consider supporting. So Scottish Friends of Palestine, if you're not already, a member or an affiliate, consider that. Bill Spears, the General Secretary of the Scottish TUC, many years ago was a founder member of that organisation. The Palestine Solidarity Campaign. There's organisations, and I'm pleased to see certainly one person here from the Glasgow Palestine Human Rights Campaign, who are in Buchanan Street and have been for years in Glasgow, every week, fundraising and raising awareness. And they've made and organisations like that make a major contribution to raising awareness. But also, as I say, Medical Aid for Palestinians. And one of the, if you can see any sort of light in the current heartbreaking situation, it's the solidarity work that's going on up and down the country, because in towns and cities, people are gathering together. In the cities and in the towns, there's regular actions, gatherings and other activity taking place, and that's really good to see. So, as I say, we're happy to support the General Council statement. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Arthur. Can we formally second? Thank you. Can we move now to motion 114, Palestine, submitted by Midlothian Trade Union Council? Can I see the mover? Thank you.
Chair, Congress, Rob Patterson, Midlothian Trade Union Council, wishing to accept the remit to the General Council statement. And I'd like to thank them as well for that presentation we had on Gaza. I think it was vitally important that we heard from the General Secretary, the GPTU, the PGTU, and from the Ambassador. I mean, they said more than any of us in this hall could say about what is actually happening just now, but not only about what is happening just now, but what has been happening since the very inception of the State of Israel. Because ever since Israel was created, its only purpose was to take land and to remove people. And they've been doing that since their inception. And there's been times where there's been vast genocide. There's been times where there's been, they would call it a war, but you don't have a war when you've got an army against a civilian population. But in these periods, they press ahead, they grab as much land as they can, they remove as many people as they can, and the people that are left are being corralled into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces of land, and they are being subjected to siege, they're being subjected to occupation, they're being subjected to the most awful oppression. And that's been going on ever since the establishment of the State of Israel. So it is really important that we make a stop to this fast-track genocide that is happening at the moment, because every time there is an attack on Gaza or any other place, the Israelis just see how much they can get away with. They act with total impunity, and they've been doing that for decades. And now we are witnessing genocide. You're actually watching it on your television. And I would say we've got a duty. We've got a duty to watch Al Jazeera. I mean, I get up every morning and I cry watching Al Jazeera. But it's important that we witness that. And we witness it so we can put pressure. What we can do is put pressure on our governments, because it's our governments that's allowing the Israelis to act with that impunity. It's our governments that are supplying the arms for them to carry out their murderous acts. And it's us, we are the ones that can stop that. The Palestinians are helpless. The Palestinians, what can they do? The Palestinians will say, if you speak to them, to exist is to resist. That's all they can do. They must exist. And when I talk about that, I'd like to talk about the attacks on UNRWA. Now, I find it absolutely unbelievable that a country committing a genocide and doing it with impunity can make a ridiculous, they lie all the time, but to make a ridiculous accusation that a half-dozen members of UNRWA took part in October the 7th. And our government believes them. I mean, they've lied and lied and lied about everything they've said since the start, but they believed that. And, we'll stop funding to UNRWA, but we'll still carry on giving arms to Israel because it's not been proved that they're committing genocide. It's not being proved. You can watch it on your telly every day. But UNRWA aren't being targeted for nothing, because UNRWA run the refugee camps, not only in Gaza, but in the rest of Palestine, in Syria, in Iraq, in other countries, in Lebanon. And the Israelis, if they can stop UNRWA, and they've actually said there's no place for them after the war's finished, if they stop UNRWA, there's no refugee camps, because there's no one there to service them, there's no one there to register them, so you have no refugees. And if you have no refugees, there's no right of return. And that's what terrifies Israel, the right of return. And to me, that is the most important, the basic, most important thing about this whole thing is the right of return of Palestinians. And if the Israelis get their way, there's no refugees, there's no right of return, and they can just carry on making life intolerable for Palestinians, and not just Palestinians, but just all non-Jews, I'd have to say, in the area. And when that happens, then that's the end. There's no, we could talk about one-state solutions, two-state solutions. The Israeli plays that game as well. They will continue talking about that. They have no intention of having a Palestinian state, but they'll talk about that because it means they're not talking about what's really happening. They're not talking about the genocide. So I welcome the General Council statement, and I think we all recognise the importance of what's happening just now, and I hope we can go forward in a united manner, which I'm sure we can, to ensure that one day Palestine will be free.
Thanks, Rab. Can I have a formal seconder for motion 114? Formally seconded, thank you. Now call on motion 115, Palestine and the BDS movement, to be moved by the STUC Annual Youth Conference.
Apologies, President. It's a short speech, so hopefully that balances it out. President Congress, Josh Morris, on behalf of the STC Youth Conference, moving motion 115 and in support of the General Council statement. As many have, I've watched the news, I've read articles, seen on social media the untold horrors the Israeli government are inflicting on the Palestinian people. As many have, I've watched these scenes with distress, despair and dread as to what comes next for Palestine. That dread led to a sense of powerlessness. Felt like no matter how many petitions we signed, how many letters we wrote, how many people were in the street, that these cries for some alleviation of the suffering in Palestine were cast into a void. It was against that background the STC Youth Committee wrote our contribution to what was a composite, but it's now been included in the statement. We'd seen protests being ignored, pushed to the side, and we concluded that a programme of boycott, divest and sanctioning in support of previous SDC policies is vital. BDS is so important because it's got tangible demands that go further than words. If you're in your workplace and you're conducting a campaign, you're fighting for something tangible. You're fighting for an actual goal. It's not just sort of wider phrases, because you're not going to win on vague basis. So it's in that vein that the Time to Divest campaign was launched. Time to Divest is currently demanding that the 160 million in the Lothian Pension Fund has invested in companies profiting from apartheid and switched to investments that don't. This 160 million, whilst a drop in the ocean for some of these companies, could be a tangible step towards halting the Israeli war machine by building political and economic power against it. This is a demand that's been backed by workers who have their pensions with the Lothian Pension Fund, such as the United City Edinburgh branch and the Edinburgh TUC, who originally put forward the section of the motion that was pertaining to the Time to Divest. Well, the ever-increasing thirst for war means that war is a sound investment. How many people do you know that want their money spent on murder? I don't. Do you? I'd much rather my pension, my money, when spent on things such as ensuring the transition to green energy wasn't a cliff edge, ensuring that my future children and grandchildren have good jobs in a safe environment in a good community, rather than having no job, no hope and no future, and have no option but to end up as a cog in the war machine. Please go further than just supporting this motion. Please, contact the Time to Divest campaign